The head hit the ground first. Most people think that was the end of the story. It wasn't. It was the moment the war actually began. While Israel shouted and the valley filled with noise, for figures in the Philistine camp didn't move at all. Not soldiers. Not men. Giants, born from the same cursed womb of Gath, watching their undefeated brother bleed into the dust. Goliath was supposed to be eternal. He was the proof that some things could not be challenged. And in one impossible second, a shepherd boy shattered that lie. Lami's grip crushed the shaft of his spear until the wood split. Ishbi-benob didn't blink. He was already counting outcomes. Saf leaned forward, memorizing the boy's silhouette. And the youngest, 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot, said nothing as his extra digits flexed slowly, marking a future that hadn't happened yet. David thought he had won a battle. What he actually did was awaken a bloodline. Because Goliath was never meant to be remembered as the giant. He was meant to be remembered as the first. And somewhere beyond the cheers, beyond the songs, beyond the valley where a body lay cooling, 4 brothers began doing the one thing giants never had to do before. They began to wait. They weren't always weapons. Once, briefly, they were boys. Gath didn't raise children, it forged assets. The brothers were born into a city where your worth was measured by how many men you could kill before breakfast. Their mother, whose name no scribe ever recorded, bore 5 sons in 7 years, each one larger than the last, each one carrying genetic markers that whispered of Nephilim ancestry. Lami came first. 9.5 feet of calculated violence. His spear, shaft thick as a weaver's beam, iron point weighing 15 pounds, could punch through shields, horses, and the men riding them in a single thrust. He fought like mathematics, precise, efficient, without wasted motion. Goliath was the middle son. Not the strongest, but the loudest. The one who needed the world to watch him win. Ishbi-benob carried a bronze sword that weighed 300 shekels. He preferred close quarters, where his strength advantage was absolute. Where he could watch the light die in his enemy's eyes. Saf defied physics. 8 feet tall but built like a sprinter. He moved with speed that shouldn't exist in a frame that large. His kills came fast, too fast for final words. The youngest had no recorded name. Only his deformity, 24 digits that marked him as either blessed or abomination. They weren't born monsters. They were made into weapons. And weapons don't grieve until one breaks. The fire gave no warmth. 4 brothers sat in a circle, surrounded by an army that suddenly felt mortal. Philistine soldiers gave them wide berth. Even allies feared the grief of giants. Lami stared into the flames, his face carved from stone. A shepherd. A boy, Ishbi-benob corrected, his voice like grinding millstones. With a god, Saf added quietly. The 6-fingered brother said nothing. His extra digits traced patterns in the dirt, 6 lines, over and over, like he was counting something only he could see. He dies, Lami said. Not a question. A geological certainty. We all go, Ishbi-benob offered. Tomorrow. Together. Crush his entire. No. The 6-fingered brother spoke for the first time. His voice was softer than his brother's, which somehow made it worse. That's how Goliath thought. Spectacle. Intimidation. And now his head decorates a Hebrew tent. Silence. We hunt him separately, the youngest continued. Different battles. Different seasons. We learn from each attempt. We adapt. Lami drew his belt knife. The blade gleamed in firelight as he dragged it across his palm. Blood welled, darker than human blood, thicker. Swear it. One by one, his brothers cut their hands. Their blood mixed in the dirt, forming a pool that looked black in the firelight. Not just David, Lami whispered. His sons. His legacy. His memory. The 6-fingered brother smiled. When we're done, no one will remember a shepherd ever stood against a giant and lived. They didn't just want David dead. They wanted the world to forget a shepherd ever stood against a giant and won. 7 years passed like held breath. David wore a crown now. Led armies. Built a capital. But he still looked over his shoulder in every battle, still flinched at the whistle of incoming projectiles, still saw Goliath's face in his nightmares. The brothers had been silent. Patient. Until Gob. Lami chose the location deliberately, a border skirmish, David present but not commanding directly, enough chaos to create opportunity. He walked onto the battlefield like weather approaching. 9.5 feet of inevitability. Israeli soldiers saw him and their formations fractured. David. Lami's voice carried across the valley like thunder. Come die like your God-cursed brother. David's hand went to his sword. His bodyguards closed ranks. But Lami wasn't interested in fairness. His spear flew. Not at David, at the captain standing 3 men to his left. The shaft moved too fast to track. It punched through the captain's chest, through the soldier behind him, and embedded in a 3rd man's shield. 3 men on 1 throw. Lami drew a 2nd spear from his back harness. Every man between me and the king dies first. He meant it. For 20 brutal minutes, Lami carved through David's guard like they were grain. His reach was impossible to counter. His strength shattered shields on impact. David actually drew his sword. Actually prepared to die. Then Elhanan, one of David's 30, a man no song remembers, rolled under Lami's guard during a spear thrust and drove the giant's own backup spear upward through his jaw. Lami fell to his knees, choking on iron and blood. His last words came out broken, for, remain. The eldest fell the same way Goliath did, killed by a weapon meant to guarantee victory. David was 53 when Ishbi-benob came for him. Too old for the front lines, his generals said. Too valuable. Too slow. They were right. The ambush happened in a rocky pass after a campaign against Philistine raiders. David's column was stretched thin, exhausted, vulnerable. Ishbi-benob had waited in the rocks for 3 days, watching, timing his attack for the moment David was most isolated. The giant dropped from a cliff face like an avalanche. His bronze sword, 300 shekels of killing edge, came down in an arc meant to split David from crown to groin. David's shield caught it. Barely. The impact drove him to his knees, the shield's rim cracking under the force. Ishbi-benob didn't taunt. Didn't waste breath. He just kept swinging. David's armor, fitted for ceremony more than combat these days, was too heavy. His sword arm, trained for harps and administrative scrolls more than warfare lately, was too slow. He blocked 1 strike. 2. The 3rd caught his shoulder guard and tore it away with half his robe. The 4th pinned him to the ground. Ishbi-benob's blade came down across David's chest. The armor held, but the force drove the air from the king's lungs. The giant leaned his weight on the sword, pressing down, grinning as David's ribs began to crack. "You killed 2 of us," Ishbi-benob whispered. "We'll kill everyone you love." Then Abishai, David's nephew, moving like judgment, came from the side with a war hammer and caved in Ishbi-benob's skull in 3 massive strikes. The giant fell across David's body, bleeding out while the king gasped for air beneath him. That night, David's commanders made it an order, not a request. The king would never personally fight again. The brothers were now 2. The king who killed a giant with a stone nearly died under the weight of a giant's brother. Saph didn't hide. He walked into the valley at Gezer in full daylight, alone, and challenged the entire Israeli army to single combat. 8 feet of lean, corded muscle. No heavy armor. No oversized weapon. Just a sword, a shield, and speed that made seasoned warriors question what they were seeing. "Send your best," he roared. "Send 10. I'll kill them all before your king finishes his morning prayers." 3 champions accepted. The first died in 4 seconds. Saph's blade removed his head before his war cry finished leaving his throat. The second lasted longer, almost 15 seconds, before Saph's shield edge caved in his chest. The third actually managed to draw blood. A shallow cut across Saph's ribs. The giant looked down at it, smiled, and moved. What happened next didn't look like fighting. It looked like butchery set to music. Saph fought the way water flows, constant motion, no wasted energy, every strike flowing into the next. He killed 6 more soldiers in the time it took their reinforcements to close the distance. His feet barely touched the ground. His sword sang. Then Sibbecai the Hushathite entered the field. Younger than the others. Faster. Trained by David himself in the art of fighting larger opponents. The duel lasted 3 minutes. Saph's speed met its match. Sibbecai moved like prophecy, not reacting to the giant's attacks, but anticipating them. When Saph's sword came high, Sibbecai was already low. When the giant pivoted left, Sibbecai had already moved right. The killing blow came mid-leap. Saph jumped to gain elevation for a downward strike. Sibbecai's blade met him in the air and opened his throat. The giant landed already dead. But before his eyes glazed, Saph laughed. Blood bubbled through his lips as he whispered. "One remains. And he's worse than all of us." 3 giants dead. 3 different warriors. But the pattern was clear, David would never face them himself. The last brother had no name in any record. Only his deformity. 24 digits. 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. A genetic marker that priests called cursed and warriors called blessed. He didn't attack for 4 years. He watched. David's paranoia became a second crown. Every shadow in the palace corridors could hide 9 feet of vengeance. Every night sound could be the last giant coming to collect the blood debt. The king's guards tripled. His food tasters increased. He stopped attending battles entirely. And still, nothing. Until the murders started. Not David. Never David directly. First, a distant cousin, found in his home with his throat crushed by a hand too large to be human. 6-fingered prints in the blood on the walls. Then a vineyard David owned, burned to ash, the foreman strangled, 6 toes imprinted in the mud near the body. A merchant who supplied the palace, drowned in a well, 6-fingered handprints bruised into his shoulders. The giant was hunting David's world, not David's body. David's advisors found the pattern. Every victim had been present at the Valley of Elah. Every single one had witnessed Goliath's fall. The giant was erasing the witnesses, killing the story one person at a time. He's patient, David told his generals, his hands shaking as he poured wine he wouldn't drink. My brothers were warriors. This one is something worse. What's worse than a warrior? Benaiah asked. David stared at the 6-fingered handprint sketched on the report in front of him. An executioner who enjoys his work. The last giant wasn't hunting a king. He was hunting a legacy. The final battle came at Gath. Poetic. Circular. The city that bred giants became the city where the last one would fall. The 6-fingered giant chose his ground carefully. A skirmish, not a war. Small enough that David wouldn't come personally. Large enough to draw his officers. Jonathan's son led the Israeli contingent. 23 years old. Trained since childhood in his uncle David's court. He'd heard the stories so many times they'd become liturgy. He'd never believed he'd face one. The giant emerged from Gath's gates like a nightmare taking physical form. Taller than Goliath had been. Broader than Lami. His hands, those terrible, 6-fingered hands, flexed around a sword that looked like it had been forged from a fallen tower. You're not David, the giant observed. His voice was almost conversational. No. Jonathan's son raised his shield. His hands were shaking. I'm better. The giant smiled. 4 of your best warriors killed my brothers. You're not even in the top 10. He was right. The first exchange nearly killed Jonathan's son. The giant's strength was absolute. His reach impossible. His extra fingers gave him grip and leverage that shouldn't exist. But the young warrior had something his predecessors didn't. He'd studied every account. Every battle. Every giant's death. And he'd noticed something. When the giant swung, those extra fingers, his advantage, spread slightly for balance. Jonathan's son didn't block the next strike. He caught it. Grabbed the 2 outer fingers on the giant's right hand and twisted with everything he had. The digits snapped. The giant screamed. And in that half-second of shock, Jonathan's son drove his blade upward through the giant's jaw into his brain. The last giant of Gath fell to the son of David's best friend. The circle closed where it began. 5 brothers. 5 battles. 5 different warriors claiming victory. But only one war being fought. The giants of Gath weren't just men of unusual size. They carried bloodlines that stretched back before the flood, genetic echoes of the Nephilim, the offspring of fallen angels and human women. Abominations that Genesis remembered and prophets condemned. Their existence was a challenge to the order God was establishing. In the old world, strength determined authority. The biggest man ruled. The strongest warrior took what he wanted. Power came from physical dominance, and the giants embodied that principle perfectly. David's stone changed the equation. It announced that anointing mattered more than anatomy. That divine appointment trumped genetic advantage. That a shepherd chosen by God could kill a warrior bred by hell. But one death wasn't enough to kill an idea. So God let the brothers live. Let them hunt. Let them rage against the new order. Let them prove, one by one, in 5 different battles across 2 decades, that their way was finished. Lami died to prove reach meant nothing against divine timing. Ishbi-benob died to prove strength meant nothing against divine protection. Saph died to prove speed meant nothing against divine preparation. The 6-fingered giant died to prove intelligence meant nothing against divine inheritance. Each brother represented a different human strategy for achieving dominance without submission to God. Each one failed the same fundamental test. And their bloodline ended, not as punishment, but as mercy. Because the alternative was worse, an eternal cycle of giants rising, being defeated by anointed champions, and learning nothing from the pattern. The age of giants had to end so the age of faith could begin. 5 brothers. 5 different warriors. 5 identical lessons. And none of them learned in time. The last giant's body was burned outside Gath's walls. No burial. No monument. Just smoke rising into a sky that had witnessed the end of an era. David was 61 when news of the final death reached him. He wept. Not for the giant, but for the years spent looking over his shoulder. For the witnesses murdered. For the weight of being the stone that started the avalanche. The story didn't end with Goliath's head hitting the ground. It ended with his youngest brother's body turning to ash. 5 giants. 2 decades. One message repeated until even the stones understood. Size doesn't save you. Strength doesn't secure you. Legacy doesn't protect you. Only alignment with the order that created you matters. Here's the question no one wants to ask. What giant are you trusting in? Not literal 9-foot warriors, but the things you've convinced yourself make you untouchable. Your resources. Your reputation. Your intelligence. Your network. Your genetic advantages. The brothers of Gath each trusted something different. Lami trusted reach. Ishbi-benob trusted raw power. Saf trusted speed. The 6-fingered giant trusted patience and intelligence. All of them died anyway. Because giants don't fall to bigger giants. They fall to boys with stones and faith in something larger than themselves. You've heard this story now. You know how it ends. You know that every giant, no matter how terrifying, how patient, how intelligent, eventually meets the battlefield where their advantage means nothing. The only question left is which side you're on. Are you the giant trusting in your own size? Or the shepherd willing to pick up a stone? If you walk away from this without wrestling with that question, you've already chosen your giant. 5 giants fell in 5 different battles. But the war they lost was decided the moment David picked up a stone. The question is, what stone are you refusing to pick up?